We should get Thoreau to do
Louis Theroux goes to Silicon Valley,
right, and just have them like hang themselves. Just give them the noose and have them hang themselves. That'd be great.
Like that was kind of my problem with this Dude Thought interview is like he talks too much. He doesn't just let Thiel just like talk and expose what a ghoul he is. He has to like keep like talking and like
yeah. And these kinds of right-wing people are highly conscious of esoteric versus exoteric.
Right.
Like what you tell the dumb masses.
Right. Hiding your power level.
So yeah. What you tell the dumb masses versus what you say to your fellow elite or whatever, the elites.
Isn't Ross Douthat their like right-wing commentator?
Yeah, he's like their guy that they have as like their right-wing interviewer and their like token rightoid basically. So yeah, and he's probably in on all this stuff, and he's basically like trying to predithai these people to
this. Okay, I'm gonna have a hard time with this. Let me go grab a decaf and so I can just drink something somewhat soothing before.
Yeah, go get your.
I need my drugs, so I'll be right back.
I need my drugs in order to survive, Peter Thiel.
I don't know what the policy of drugs on stream are, but
yeah, what is the policy? You're allowed to smoke weed on stream if you have.
I'm not sure because if I could, then I would.
I think people like drink beers on stream. I think.
All I got is weed. But this guy also doesn't look very good. Like
he looks like a reptile. He looks like he looks like he's a reptilian. Like he's the kind of guy who's got me thinking maybe David Icke has a point.
Well, isn't he supposed to be one of those people who like injects himself with other people's blood?
Yes. Yes.
Doesn't seem like it's working.
Supposedly injects himself with the blood of young people to keep himself young.
A little vampire.
Yeah. Yeah. And as someone mentions, the title of the piece, Peter Thiel and the Antichrist. Yeah, he's really into René Girard.
Oh,
he's like this French theorist who has this whole theory called mimetic desire. And I haven't read. What was that?
It's always the French.
Yeah, I haven't read Girard, so I can't really explain him as like someone as an expert. My understanding is that like he kind of thinks that there's like part of human nature is that we're always trying to kind of mimic each other's desires, and this creates like this kind of insolvable like sense of rivalry amongst humanity that can only be solved through a kind of symbolic act of sacrifice, which he calls a scapegoat. And for Girard, Christianity is kind of like as revolutionary.
Sorelian, right? It's like it's another play on the Sorelian theme with these people.
Yeah, maybe he is influenced by Sorel. But yeah, so there's kind of like this idea that Christ kind of like ends the cycle of like sacrifice and scapegoating through his sacrifice. He ends like the cycle of scapegoating, I guess. And so Peter Thiel has like this kind of weird understanding of Christianity, like influenced by Girard.
Is he a Christian?
Yes, he's a Catholic.
He is a Christian. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he's a Catholic naturally.
Yeah. This Girard guy, I'm not gonna lie, his thinking kind of sounds interesting. And
so he is really interesting, and I don't think like he himself is like a rightoid, or like you have to like be a rightoid to like learn from Girard or whatever. But like he's definitely someone that like a lot of these right wingers are fascinated by, and they're really fascinated by this theory of like the scapegoat and mimetic desire.
Well, mimetic desire, right?
Yeah,
that's like really kind of what is central to his thinking.
Well, what is that supposed? Is that just because I understand the idea of like the memes or whatever, but or in a scientific sense, but
no, mimetic is in imitating.
Yeah.
Right. I guess my thing is what's supposed to be the significance of that revelation or insight? Like we all imitate each other, okay?
Well, it creates rivalry because we mimic each other's desires. And so we imitate each other, and So what we desire is based not on like I guess the inherent like qualities of like the object, but like on the fact that other people want things. And so that leads us to like engage in rivalries with people. That creates like inherent like
And
conflict.
from what I understand, this conflict generating tendency of mimetic desire can only be checked by the creation of a scapegoat or of a sacrificial object or subject. And so that's why Gerard really liked Christianity, because that's what Jesus
This is what you were mentioning. Okay.
Yeah,
where you were gone, I was kind of explaining how like he sees like the sacrifice of Jesus is kind of like what ends the cycle of scapegoating or whatever.
It's a check, or kind of it's like a check on that.
I mean, that is kind of interesting.
The stabilizing tendency of mimetic desire. It is. It
is interesting. I will say though, like there is a tendency to always be like, well, and this is why Christianity is the perfect answer. It seems a little it's trite. It's like
and it's like it doesn't seem like a very scientific theory of society. Like it seems like something that's like interesting as like a literary device, and even as like something you can kind of like maybe see in history, but as like an actual scientific theory of society, like I don't think there's.
Yeah, I don't see any necessary connection between running a society and having a scapegoat necessarily.
Right, but I mean, you can definitely see like scapegoat behavior all throughout.
Absolutely,
society. You can definitely see that kind of mimicry of desire and creating rival. I think that's definitely a part of human behavior. That there's definitely something to that, but
it seems as a causal hypothesis for scapegoating, it seems very difficult to operationalize.
Right.
Of how do you test and falsify it?
Does that not strike you as like a kind of common tendency in right-wing philosophical thinking, is to take one small aspect of human, experience, or like in this case, the mimicry aspect, and then sort of blow it up as the great evil, to blow it up as the thing that's causing everything else.
Right.
Well, I mean, I think that's kind of one of the things about philosophy is that it's a laboratory it's a laboratory for concepts in a way, right?
Right.
So, it's not like anything goes, because especially in modern philosophy, there are certain like standards of like rigor, coherence, clarity that apply, but it's a space where you're supposed to be able to kind of think grand things, right? So, and I think that's kind of an example of it. And as I said, it's you can generate this philosophical idea, but then like, is it a piece of social science? It seems very difficult to operationalize to test it, basically.
Well, these group of people really seem to be motivated by these kind of grand ideas.
Yeah.
Much.
Oh,
without really thinking them through.
Well, I mean, there's also a place for like, there's something that Richard Feynman used to say. It's something he said in the context of physics, but he said too much rigor is rigor mortis. And I think he's right about that. When you start only focusing on rigor, you lose the kind of imaginativeness and creativity that you sometimes need to like come up with not only an understanding of the world, but a kind of like I don't want to say a myth, but a kind of just like heroic image and horizon to live up to. So I think in that way it actually is I think it's quite smart for them to have like an ambitious philosophy. I mean, let's be honest, like OG Marxism is really ambitious. It's in many ways, some parts of it are utopian. Like, will we ever live in the kind of super abundant society that Marx believed would come about? No, we're not. I mean, let's just be honest. We'll never live for physical reasons. We will never live, most likely, in a society where, like, and you can have anything at no cost.
Right.
So
Everything is free and teleported to you instantaneously. Like,
yeah, I mean, like, unless there's a laser gun that can change the submolecular structure of things and create things out of nothing, then yeah, we're going to be constrained in that way. So but anyways, let's watch. Do you have
let's watch what Thiel has to say, because
you have some greatest hits of this shit? Because I'm not going to spend like
I'm gonna skip through, but I think what he starts out talking about stagnation, I think, is important, because I think it kind of exposes some of the thought that is influencing the bizarre, like, anti-science stuff that's going on with the Trump administration.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, that's another thing we didn't talk about. Like, yours truly might be fucked because of this.
Yeah, so there is an ideology behind this anti-science crusade.
Okay, let's see.
To interesting times.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Thanks for being here. So I want to start by taking you back in time about 13 or 14 years. You wrote an essay for National Review, the conservative magazine, called The End of the Future. And basically the argument in that essay was that the dynamic, fast-paced, ever-changing modern world was just not nearly as dynamic as people thought. And that actually we entered a period of technological stagnation, that sort of digital life was a breakthrough, but not as big a breakthrough as people had hoped, and that sort of the world was kind of stuck, basically. Yes. And you weren't the only person to make arguments like this, but it had a special potency coming from you because you were a Silicon Valley insider who had gotten rich in the digital revolution. So I'm curious, in 2025, right, do you think that diagnosis...
This game...
Damn it! Get premium!
You're not ready.
Can't escape ads. Or you get the ad block, though. You don't have to get it.
Wow, this can't...
Donald,
save us!
Free us from marketing.
You're in the middle of this.
Bro.
They still have this game? Is this Eve?
Yeah, it's Eve. Have you ever played this shit?
You're seeing intrigue.
I played it like
still holds
15 years ago.
Yes, I still broadly believe in the stagnation thesis. It was never an absolute thesis. So the claim was not that we were absolutely completely stuck. It was in some ways a claim about the velocity had slowed. It wasn't, zero, but that we were, I don't know, from 1750 to 1970, 200 plus years were periods of accelerating change where we're, relentlessly, we're moving faster. The ships were faster, the railroads were faster, the cars were faster, the planes were faster. It culminates in the Concorde and the Apollo missions, and then that in all sorts of dimensions, things had slowed. There was, I always made an exception for the world of bits. So we had, computers and software and internet and mobile internet. And then, the last 10, 15 years, you had crypto and the AI revolution, which I think is in some sense pretty big. But the question is, is it enough to really get out of this generalized sense of stagnation? And there's an epistemological question you can start with on the Back to the Future essays. How do we even know whether we're in stagnation or acceleration? Because one of the features of latent modernity is that people are hyper specialized, and so can you say that we're not making progress in physics unless you've devoted half your life to studying string theory? Or what about quantum computers?
Well,
or what about
pause it real quick.
Cancer?
Pause it real quick. No, string theory, no one has made any progress in string theory because it's just bullshit. Like, it's just not a theory of...
Like, this is a kind of point I wanted to make. Like, he's a guy that got rich off of technology, but he doesn't actually seem to understand, like, how technology develops and how it's diffused.
Yeah.
He seems to be complaining, like, well, between 1750 and 1950, we had so much amazing progress. And now since then, it's not been that fast. And it's like, well, yeah, dude, because, 200 years from 1750 to 1950, you're developing all this technology, like it's leapfrogging, basically. At some point, you're going to slow down. Like
Yeah.
most of the technology in the last 70 years has been about miniaturization, right? The transistor
Yeah.
and things like that. Those are all breakthroughs as well. It's just like he seems to be complaining that it hasn't taken the tenor that he would like. Like we're not living in the
Well,
Jetsons or something.
also, it's kind of like, what are the conditions for technological growth? And like, I think one of the weaknesses of Marx's theory, well, I shouldn't say this because I'm sure somewhere he talks about it. You know, whenever anyone says Marx didn't do X, you look somewhere and he did. But I think so in the typical account, the notion is that a huge stimulus for technological change is that um, in order to increase labor productivity, there needs to be revolutions in the productive forces. But past that, so capital in its relentless pursuit to maximize itself revolutionizes the productive forces. Of course, like from the antecedent of that statement to the consequent, a causal theory of it is left unexplained, right? Or is implicit. And it turns out that, especially in the post-war period, a huge reason for the scientific and technological advances made was the strong role played by the state and by state financing, sometimes for not so great reasons, for military reasons. But that was a huge reason why the US, the Soviet Union, et cetera, made such advances in basic science and in its application and development of technologies. And that support is disappearing. The ruling class, like that's backing, is destroying that. They're destroying that support for the revolutionizing of the productive forces. They're cannibalizing the capacity to revolutionize the productive forces. So that's something I doubt he's going to talk about. He's a fucking libertarian. He's going to say we just need IBM or whatever to develop technologies. But those are firms. I work with these people. They give us credits to do quantum simulations. They have an interest in not being clear on the critical limits of their systems.
How much of this is actually the social relations of production holding back revolutionizing the forces of production?
Well, it is.
I mean, have you ever heard the thesis that, for example, in Central Europe, basically that after the Black Death, because the Black Death killed so many people, it made labor scarce, right? And so it induced a turn towards wage labor, which then induced a turn towards labor-saving technologies, which, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, how much of this is just like the modern social relations and infrastructure in society are like, well, it's just not profitable to do these technologies. Like AI is a perfect example of that. Actually, AI is still not profitable.
Well, it's also like an expression of the fact that, like, because of political movements, the social relations have modified to the point where property ownership, you know, property owners have more power than ever, not only over labor power, but over the state itself. And they are acting in ways that are eroding the state capacity or the superstructure to promote the development or the revolutionizing of the productive forces. I mean, that's an extremely complex causal claim, but you know, I think that that's kind of the story I would start to tell, right? You know, to attack these issues.
It's also worth thinking about like the decadence of the productive forces, the way that like research and technology goes into developing productive forces that are not really useful for humanity.
Oh yeah, at all.
Like cryptocurrency.
Yeah, that's
and
a good point.
Yeah.
Crappy AI image generation, rather than like developing technology that will help us cope with climate change.
Yeah,
for example, or
imagine you gave like 800 billion to the development of nuclear fusion. Might actually be somewhere with it.
Yeah, well, that's
you
what
know, if
LaRouche
you have
wants.
like, I'm pushing LaRouche shit, bro. Anyways, let's listen to this fucking ghoul.
Yeah.
Research and biotech and the sort of all these verticals, and then how much does, you know, progress in cancer count versus string theory? And so you have to give weightings to all these things. So it's in theory, it's an extremely difficult question to get a handle of because, yeah, the fact that it's so hard to answer that we have ever narrower groups of guardians guarding themselves is itself cause for skepticism. And so, yes, I think broadly we're in this world that's still pretty stuck. It's not absolutely stuck.
Yeah, you mentioned Back to the Future, and we just showed our kids the original Back to the Future, the first one with Michael J. Fox, and of course,
yeah, it was like 1955 to 1985,
right.
30 years back, and then the Back to Future 2 was, I think, 1985 to 2015, which is now a decade in the past, and that's where you had flying cars, and the 2015 future.
Why is that the mark?
Is wildly divergent.
The 2015 future did have.
I'm telling you, dude, he's just mad he doesn't live in the Jetsons. I'm telling you. He wants to live in the Jetsons.
Bro, flying cars sounds like like a disaster. Fucking just like collisions all over and shit. Like, dude, what?
Yeah.
Why is that the mark of technology? Like, everyone has like their own car, but it flies. That's wow. That's the horizon of humanity.
Well, at least it correctly points out that technological innovation or development is iterative. You know,
Yeah,
it's
I guess.
like, well, we're gonna make a better car. It flies now.
Yeah, and then it's also dispenses hamburgers and does healthcare for you. And if you don't meet the productivity quota, you get euthanized and turned into Soylent Green. You know, that's this fucking guy is just Jesus Christ.
But I just don't agree with the premise. Like, technology has advanced a lot in the last 40, 50 years.
Yeah,
it just
man.
hasn't advanced in a way that, I guess, you know, there's no flying cars, but
Yeah,
I mean, there's electrical vehicles.
yeah, for real, dude.
Like, what?
No, what we need is flying electric vehicles, man.
It was this funny where he talks about like the oppressive, like socialist future where Greta Thunberg is like forcing
States
everyone
has
to
functioned
consume.
for, the first 200 years of its existence.
So you think that ordinary people won't accept stagnation in the end?
It's
That they will rebel and sort of pull things down around them in the course of that rebellion?
They may rebel, or our institutions don't work. All of our institutions are predicated on growth.
Right. Our
If you-
our budgets are certainly predicated on growth.
Yeah,
Yes.
if you say, I don't know, Reagan and Obama. Reagan was sort of consumer capitalism, which is oxymoronic. It was, you borrow, you don't save money as a capitalist, you borrow money. And Obama was low tax socialism, just as oxymoronic as, the
Low
I don't
consumer
see any of these
capitalism
things
of
as
Reagan.
moronic.
And yeah, I like
Yeah.
low tax socialism way better than high tax socialism, but I worry that it's not sustainable. At some point, the taxes go up or the socialism ends. So it's deeply unstable.
What
And
did Obama
that's
do?
why people are.
Nothing.
I know, like what happened under Obama that made these guys like? I understand that like there was some regulations under Biden that made these people like really pissed off, but under Obama, the tech people got all they
like
wanted.
Biden threatened kind of like antitrust shit, but like never gonna do
Yeah.
it. That fucking mummy was never gonna push that shit through. Like what?
Yeah,
What are they talking about? He's just making unsubstantiated claim after unsubstantiated claim. The level of rigor is worse than our podcast or our stream has 500 viewers. Like, what are you doing? Like, how is this?
but that's the thing is like these people like they think they're so smart and educated and like have read all this philosophy, but in the end, like they're just Fox
Bro,
News.
go to the Cosmonaut Discord. There's nothing but brainiacs, dog. They know way more than this idiot.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Not
All
optimistic.
underemployed
They don't
fucking
think we've hit
millennials.
some stable, the
Right.
Greta future. Maybe it can work.
This
but
is
we're
the
not
Greta
yet there.
Thunberg. Just to be clear, that's a reference to Greta Thunberg, the activist best known for anti-climate change protests, who, to you, I would say, represents a kind of symbol of a anti-growth, effectively authoritarian, environmentalist-dominated future.
Sure, but we're not there yet. We're not there yet. It'd be like a
there yet.
very
What is
very
this
different
Greta
society if you
Thunberg?
if you
If you
really
actually
stuck-
lived in a
if you-
kind of degrowth, small Scandinavian
yeah.
villages.
I'm not sure it'd be North Korea, but it would be super oppressive.
One thing that's always struck me is that when you have this sense of stagnation, a sense of decadence, right? To use a word that I like to use for it in a society, you then also have people who end up being kind of eager for a crisis, right? Eager for a moment to come along where, you know, they can radically redirect society from the path it's on. Because I tend to think that in rich societies, you hit a certain level of wealth, people become very comfortable, they become risk averse, and it's just hard. It's hard to get out of decadence into something new without a crisis. So the original example for me was after September 11th. There was this whole mentality among foreign policy conservatives that we had been decadent and stagnant, and now is our time to, you know, wake up and launch a new crusade and remake the world. And obviously that ended very badly. But something similar.
But it was Bush 43 just told people to go shopping right away.
So it wasn't anti-decadent enough.
For the most part.
But what
So
what
you-
is
there was-
decadence?
there was
in
maybe
this
there was
thing? How are they
some,
defining decadence? This conversation is very fashy to me.
Yo, I love AJ. Yeah, he knows Obama's not. Yeah, you're right. First off, and they're two parasites. One,
Yeah, exactly. Two parasites talking
Yeah,
about decadence.
two parasites talking
Yeah.
about decadence.
you have decadence when when this guy gets paid to do whatever he's doing.
But I don't think once they've attempted to actually define what the decadence is that they're referring to.
Well, you know, I mean, the reason I went, oh God, when he said decadent is because when decadence is like a central concept.
Well, it kind of sounds like some more rightoid sort of like, well, the people, like.
Oh, I used the term decadence maybe like 10 minutes ago to kind of describe the development of the production.
Right, I understood it in that sense, but in the sense that they're talking about it, it kind of sounds more spiritual. Like, well,
Exactly.
there's a spiritual decadence,
Right,
and
right.
the people they don't know what it's like to be part of the nation, and we need a war to
Exactly. Like that's like very
weird
much
as fuck.
that's very much a discourse that like you even find in like even people before like Sorel, but Sorel, Oswald Spengler. You can even find kind of like touches of it in Nietzsche. Like it's
Oh yeah, I mean it's all over
exactly.
the right.
Like we would use it in a very different way. It functions in a very different way in our kind of conceptual framework. But yeah, as soon as it becomes spiritual decadence becomes a fucking central concept of a discourse, you know, it's no good, no bueno.
Well, there's a sense in which I think the way they're talking about decadence is they're talking about like the ruling elite has kind of lost a sense of mission, a sense of purpose. There's no real mythos that's kind of uniting the ruling elite and giving it a goal that's kind of uniting the nation and creating this grand civilization.
You know what's interesting is like, so Ernst Renan, who is a French, he's kind of like thought of as like the French liberal of the late 19th century. Like he very much in many ways pioneered that discourse that like liberal republicanism or quote unquote democracy gave no national project or did not come equipped with a national project, and for that reason had a kind of individualistic and decadent tendency, and was very much like, oh, we need to have a sort of national ethos or whatever. So
right. And then someone like Sorel, he kind of picks up on this and says, well, really it's the proletariat who can kind of save
decadence.
Decadence.
Yeah. Sorel is actually insane, and a lot of people, like, we're going to talk next week about Sorel, and he's a weird guy, and a lot, even like Burnham gets him very wrong in the historical points, but we're going to talk about James Burnham's The Machiavellians next week, so that's another story. Anyways, let's keep listening. This fucking
these decadent motherfuckers.
Neocon foreign policy enclave in which people were LARPing as a way to get out of decadence, but the dominant thing was Bush 43 people telling people just to go shopping.
So what risks should you be willing to take to escape decadence?
What do you mean?
It does seem like there's a danger here where the people who want to be anti-decadent have to take on a lot of risk. They have to say, look, you've got this nice,
Yep.
stable, comfortable society, but guess what? We'd like to have a war or a crisis or a total reorganization of government and so on. They have to lean into danger, right?
Well, I don't know if I have to answer. I don't know if I have to give you a precise answer, but my directional answer is a lot more.
Yeah.
We should take a lot more risk. We should be doing a lot more. And I don't know, I can go through all these different verticals. It's, if we look at biotech, something like dementia, Alzheimer's, we've made zero progress in 40 to 50 years. People are completely stuck on beta amyloids. It's obviously not working. It's just some kind of a stupid racket where the people are just reinforcing themselves. And so, yes, we need to take way more risk in that department.
Well, I want to ask,
What the hell does that mean?
to keep us in the concrete, I want to stay with that example for a minute and ask, okay, what does that mean, saying we need to take more risks in anti-aging?
Yeah, this is
I dare
interesting,
you
actually.
to let me
Oh,
build.
God dang it.
Oh my god.
Here. Yeah, I need to get the ad blocker set up on this.
The
YouTube.
FDA has to step back and say, anyone who has a new treatment for Alzheimer's can, go ahead and sell it on the open market. Like, what is risk in the medical space look like?
Yeah, you would take a lot more risk. If you have some
already said
fatal
that.
disease, there probably are a lot more risks you can take. There are a lot more risks the researchers can take. Culturally, what I imagine it looks like is early modernity, where people, they thought we would cure diseases. They thought we would have
He
radical
just wants
life
no regulations
extension.
for like medical
Immortality that was
testing,
part of the
basically.
project of early modernity. It was Francis Bacon, Condorcet. It was, and maybe it was anti-Christian, maybe it was downstream of Christianity. It was competitive. If Christianity promised you a physical resurrection, science was not going to succeed unless it promised you the exact same thing. And then, but I don't know. I remember 1999, 2000, when we were running PayPal. One of my co-founders, Luke Nosek, he was into Alcor and cryonics, and people should freeze themselves. And we had one day where we took the
please
whole
do
company
that.
to a freeze
Yeah, why don't you just do
Bro,
that? Why don't you just
immediately.
Don't cool your body to
sell
like
Tupperware
fucking
policies at a
0
freezing
Kelvin.
party.
They sell their. Was it just your heads? What was
It
going to be frozen?
You could get a full body or just
the
a head.
head.
I do
But just the
remember
head
that.
was
I
cheap.
do
It was
remember this,
disturbing
though.
when the dot matrix printer didn't quite work, and so the freezing policies couldn't be printed out. But in retrospect, this was still
Technological stagnation once again, right?
But it was but it's also a symptom of the decline, because in 1999, this was not a mainstream view, but there was still a fringe boomer view where they still believed they could live forever.
See, this is like
Wait.
this is
Wait, I discovered Thiel more than 10 years ago. Wait, when I was 18? Like 12 years ago, because I read an article about a startup firm where they were trying to cure death.
no,
Oh,
that's
doing
been his
that.
thing for a
Oh,
while.
he's
is
really
pursuing
into immortality. So why is he back? Has he finally realized that that's not feasible? This
No, he's not bashing.
guy's
He's kind
terrified
of
of death. This guy's terrified of death. He
Oh
has
yeah.
a
Oh, yeah.
total incapacity to face his finitude. That's very obviously like the animating neurosis of his life.
It's funny because I would argue to him, it's like a ruling, like being so obsessed with trying to stop your own like mortality is actually a symptoms of decadence to me. If of a spiritual decadence,
Right.
Because I feel like you would understand death as the natural order in nature if you I don't know.
Yeah,
It's weird.
I agree.
It's like, if Trotsky was still around, he'd probably have some article where he's like, oh, the social psychology of the ruling class shows that these, like, there's a malaise with these people. Like, they've lost all historical mission.
Yeah.
And so they grasp to these fantasies of colonizing Mars, of living forever, to try to give themselves some sort of historical direction at this point.
Well, there's that one Trotsky quote where he says there's kind of 3 tragedies of humanity: sex, death, and hunger.
And
like that is kind of the
stagnation is apparently when magic
tragedy.
isn't real. Yeah, basically, and Back to the Future isn't reality.
Yeah.
with, you know, the movie from the 80s. Yeah.
But I think like the stagnation stuff he's talking about is interesting because if you look at the science defunding that the Trump administration is doing, it's like it doesn't really make sense from a kind of material interest standpoint. Because if you're trying to build the American empire to be the most effective capitalist behemoth in the world and destroy China, like clearly you want to fund science as much as possible.
Yeah, something I don't get about. Well, I mean, I get why like Trump and some of the people around him do that because I think they fundamentally think that it's the firms who are going to do the science because they're dumb, and
Right.
that this is like government funded research is just another example of like inefficient government. But like they fundamentally just like don't understand how science has been done or is structured in the US since post-war, right? So
Right.
yeah, they have no idea how it works. Like they really don't get it.
Yeah, well, because like Thiel's whole thing is like, well, what if we do like put in like another like 10 years of dementia research on the current path and keep funding it? It's not going to go anywhere because of stagnation. There's no point. And to him, like I feel like he's kind of convinced like the Trump administration that there's like we kind of just need to like stop funding our existing science institutions and just like shake up the system completely and like instead like give money to people like
Right.
Thiel and like all these random different venture capitalists.
Yeah,
As the private sector
And
organized
they're
it
going to, like-
completely.
Bro, you want to fucking do something for science? Stop making this weird funding system where you have to jump through 80 hoops and write 50 grants so that you can get $10,000.
They don't seem to understand that like most of the big like technological innovations came from state research that
Of
was then
course they did.
privatized.
All of them did. Like all of them. Like
Right.
all of it. Literally.
But to them, like the current model isn't working. It's because it hasn't cured dementia yet. And so to them, we're just like sinking money into scientific research into a stagnating system. And so to them, like funding existing scientific research is just pointless because it's all stagnating and not going anywhere.
I mean, I won't lie. I'll agree on one vague point. Things need to change in American science. I could go on for hours about quote unquote what's wrong or what is wrong, but it certainly isn't to like stop funding all state research immediately, right? That is just ridiculous. The major issue is that in my opinion is the militarization of American science and the commercialization of American science, in the sense that like very much the research programs and projects are funded and shaped by military and or industrial interests, and that is fundamentally perverting our ability to make progress scientifically, basic level of research. So that's there needs to basically be more space, time, and resources for basic forms of research and a very concerted effort for their application to enhance human welfare. And that doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I think obviously that's not what Thiel's analysis is.
The fuck does this guy know? He hasn't done one day of scientific research in his life.
That's the thing is like he's talking. Oh, it's just hard to know because of specialization. So you're just hand waving away the fact that you don't really know anything. You're just mad that your science fiction fantasy hasn't come to life yet.
And that was the last generation. And so I'm always anti-boomer, but maybe there's something we've lost even in this fringe boomer narcissism where there were at least a few boomers who still, believed science would cure all their diseases.
Like you?
No one who's a millennial believes that anymore.
I think there are some people who believe in a different kind of immortality, though. Right now, I think part of the fascination with AI is connected to a specific vision of transcending limits. And I'm going to ask you about that after I ask you about politics, because one of the striking things I thought about your original argument on stagnation, which was mostly about technology and the
original.
economy,
Nothing
was that
original.
it could be applied to a pretty wide range of things.
Incrediware is the first wearable anti-inflammatory.
Gosh darn it.
Not only does
Bro,
it take away
how's
the
that? He's zooted. That's what's up.
For writing that essay,
Fucking
you were
Thiel is
interested in
tripping balls.
seasteading
Sure.
this ideas of essentially building new polities independent of the sclerotic
Network state.
Western world.
Oh, soft wars.
But then you made a pivot in the
Fucking
2010s.
towns.
So you were, one of the few prominent, maybe the only prominent Silicon Valley supporter of Donald
At
Trump.
best.
In 2016, you supported a few sort of carefully selected Republican Senate candidates. One of them is now the Vice President of the United States. And my view as an observer of what you were doing was that you were basically being a kind of venture capitalist for politics, right? You were saying, here are some disruptive agents who might change the political status quo, and it's worth a certain kind of risk here. Is that how you thought about
Sure,
that?
there were all sorts of levels. I mean, one level was these hopes that we could redirect the Titanic from the iceberg was heading to, or whatever the metaphor is, really change course as a society.
Through political
maybe
change.
Much narrower aspiration was that we could maybe at least have a conversation about this. When someone like Trump said, "Make America Great Again," okay, is that a positive, optimistic, ambitious agenda, or is it merely, a very pessimistic assessment of where we are, that we are no longer a great country? And I didn't have great expectations about what Trump would do in a positive way, but I thought at least for the first time in 100 years, we had a Republican who was not giving us this syrupy Bush nonsense, and that was not the same as progress, but we could at least have a conversation. In retrospect,
That's interesting because he's basically saying like, well, Trump isn't like, he doesn't share my exact ideology, but he's someone who would listen to me. You can have a conversation.
More like I can fucking buy him.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not this syrupy Bush nonsense. Okay, he's, he believes in the decadence of Western civilization.
I mean, I think there are limits to how much you can buy him, because
Yeah.
Elon Musk paid quite a pretty penny for him and didn't get what he wanted in the end.
This is so profoundly uninteresting.
He's a very uninteresting person, I think. And
Like,
it's,
yeah. Whatever the
like
metaphor.
10 years ago, like
He gave up on his own metaphor like barely a second in. He was like, "Whatever the metaphor, it's your metaphor, dude."
He's trying to be clever, and then he's like, "Oh fuck, I couldn't think of anything." Oh my god. The
I'm
metaphor,
going to go to some of the most replayed sections. I'm trying to.
the metaphor for watching this is like having nails driven into my skull by a hammer.
as conformist. Maybe that's not the kind of smartness that's going to make a difference.
So do you fear then a plausible future where AI in a way becomes itself stagnationist? That it's like highly intelligent, creative in a conformist way. It's like, the Netflix algorithm. It makes infinite okay movies.
That's already
that
what
people
AI
watch.
is.
It
It's at its
generates
worst.
infinite okay ideas. It puts a bunch of people out of work and makes them obsolete, but it doesn't. It like deepens stagnation in some way. Is that a fear?
It's
Like people just outsource.
It's quite possible that's certainly a risk.
That's certainly a risk. It's just.
He sounds kind of annoyed. He's like, "Yeah, dude."
I don't think this is a man who's used to like having anybody like question his agenda ever, even in like this very softball way that Ross Douthat, who's, as someone mentioned, is probably aligned with the Orban government in Hungary.
I mean, he's just asking for a clarification. He seems to be annoyed at the fact that, well, you're not just accepting what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, this guy sucks, dude.
But I guess where I end up is I still think we should be trying AI, and that the alternative is just total stagnation. So yeah, there's sort of all sorts of interesting things going to happen with, okay, maybe drones, in a military context are combined with AI, and okay, this is kind of scary or dangerous or dystopian, or it's going to change things. But if you don't have AI, wow, there's just nothing going on. And I don't know, this
Yo, this guy
is
sucks.
like a version of
I
this
know. It's
discussion
just like he's like, yeah, I guess it could be this like scary dystopian, Terminator hellscape with drones and blah blah blah. But if we don't do it, it'll be stagnation. And
it'll just be nothing. It's like, what are you talking about?
He can only say this because he doesn't have the fear of living under the consequences of all this. He knows that he's going to be the guy like in charge of the Skynet, like deciding who gets like exterminated. So obviously the choice is clear to him. But
Bro, the analyses we've given of AI, compare what we've said to this.
I know, compared to like reading the average cosmonaut article about
like
AI,
fucking, we've had. Oh my god,
it's crazy, bro. He's not even really trying to grapple with it.
I know.
I also find him to be so inconsistent because one minute he's like, well, this causes stagnation. And then he bringing up like, he's like, well, doesn't AI also cause stagnation when like everyone just depends on AI to do all the thinking for them? And he's like, well, maybe, but that's just a risk we're going to have to take.
Like, why?
It's like, okay, so you don't, I don't know. Like, I don't know why I should care about this, dude. You're not really convincing me that I should care about this.
Oh man, this guy.
It's
just an intellectual mediocrity.
And I don't know, there's like a version of this discussion on the internet where, did the internet lead to more conformity and more wokeness? And yeah, there are all sorts of ways where it didn't lead to quite the cornucopian, diverse explosion of ideas that libertarians fantasized about in 1999. But counterfactually, I would argue that it was still better than the alternative, that if we hadn't had the internet, maybe it would be worse.
People like you are what made the internet
it's better than the alternative, and the alternative is nothing at all. Because here's one place where the stagnationist arguments are still reinforced. The fact that we're only talking about AI, I feel, is always an implicit acknowledgement that but for AI, we are like in almost total stagnation.
But the world of AI is clearly filled with people who, at the very least, seem to have a more utopian, transformative, whatever word you want to call it, view of the technology than you're expressing here, right? And you were mentioned earlier the idea that the modern world used to promise radical life extension and doesn't anymore. It seems very clear to me that a number of people deeply involved in artificial intelligence see it as a kind of mechanism for transhumanism, for transcendence of our mortal flesh, and either some kind of creation of a successor species or some kind of merger of mind and machine. And do you think that's just all kind of irrelevant fantasy? Or do you think it's just hype? Do you think people are trying to raise money by pretending that we're going to build a machine god, right? Is it hype? Is it delusion? Is it something you worry about? I think you would prefer the human race to endure, right?
What a
You're
question.
hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
Oh,
I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit
Should
in this.
the human race survive?
That includes yourself now.
Yes.
Okay.
But I also would.
Qualification.
I also would like us to radically solve these problems,
Right.
and so it's always
He's smiling because he's like, I'd like to call all the
There's
dysgenic,
DIY.
like.
Well,
scum
I
from
think
the
part of it is an admission that he's not human.
Yeah.
He might be reptilian.
It's a
That's what I'm saying. This guy makes David Icke have a point.
radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body. And there's a critique of, let's say, the trans people in a sexual context, or I don't know, a transvestite is someone who changes their clothes and cross dresses, and a transsexual is someone where you change your penis into a vagina. and we can then debate how well those surgeries work. But we want more transformation than that. The critique is not that it's weird and unnatural. It's so pathetically little. And okay, we want more than cross-dressing or changing your sex organs. We want you to be able to change your heart and change your mind and change your whole body. And then Orthodox Christianity, by the
This
way,
guy's still a Catholic?
the critique
What?
Orthodox Christianity has of this is these things don't go far enough. Like that transhumanism is just changing your body, but you also need to transform your soul.
Wait, is
you
he
need to
Orthodox?
transform your whole
He's
self.
supposed to be a Catholic, right?
I think he's into some weird heterodox Christianity stuff. I
Because I can tell you right off the bat, this is all very
I don't-
not Catholic.
Yeah,
no, I don't think he's Catholic. I think this sounds like Russian cosmism,
bro. Yeah, it does.
which was like influenced by weird orthodoxy stuff.
But like, what?
This is heresy, bro.
I'm pretty sure nowhere in the I don't think in the Council of like Nicaea they were like debating if like you should change your heart physically, like, and switch your organs up, Blade Runner style. Like, I don't even know what the fuck this.
He's Catholic. Someone said in the chat.
Dude, this shit is. I feel like I'm going crazy listening. to
Yeah,
this.
no, but this guy is a very powerful person, and his ideas are not very coherent or very logical. He's kind of all over the place. Like,
You know what I also. What I love also is that like people criticize us for being like utopian and like
Our
unreal.
utopian does not reach even a tenth of whatever the
No,
fuck
not
this
even
is.
close, dude. Like, are you kidding me? Like, what the?
Duthod is Orthodox Christian after Francis came in.
Is that before or after he moved to Hungary?
Yeah, wow. Okay, let's watch a little bit more. And
Yeah,
then-
there's another segment after this one.
And so,
Right, but
this
the
is
other
where,
wait. I generally agree with what I think is your belief that religion should be a friend to science and ideas of scientific progress. I think any idea of divine providence has to encompass the fact that we have progressed and achieved and done things that would have been unimaginable to our ancestors. But it still also seems like, yeah, the promise of Christianity in the end is you get the perfected body and the perfected soul through God's grace. And the person who tries to do it on their own with a bunch of machines is likely to end up as a dystopian character.
well, it's.
Bro,
let's
God,
articulate this.
And you can have a heretical form of Christianity,
I-
that says something else.
I don't know. I think the word nature does not occur once in the Old Testament, and so if you and there is a word in which a sense in which the way I understand the Judeo-Christian inspiration is it is about transcending nature. It is about overcoming things. And
Now, this is a very interesting reading of Christianity, I gotta say. Since I haven't heard of this reading of Christianity. Usually right wing Christian type, they're like, oh, the problem with trans is that it goes against nature, but Thiel is like, no, it doesn't go far enough.
that is kind of cool. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really disagree with the idea that we need to I don't think we need to be in fealty to nature or anything but at the same time I don't think we should be creating these false promises of immortality and stuff. And
yeah, I don't even know where to begin with transhumanism.
yeah, because there is a logical kernel to transhumanism. I mean, in a way, we already are transhumanists in the sense that we
I don't know that much about it, honestly, as I guess a body of thought, but I would actually argue the same thing, that we're already transhuman. I mean, your smartphone could be considered an extension of your bodily organs at this point.
right.
Yeah, I don't know what to. I don't know what to think of transhumanism. I'd have to read more and an actual intelligent version of it,
Yeah, but it's just
as opposed to just some shit about biohacking and fucking cyberpunk.
Yeah, I can't. It's just such a melange of ideas. It's hard to know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. They're
Like if someone was like, "Oh, I could like give you a mod that like lets you jump higher," I'd be like, "Okay,
Hell
sure,
yeah, dude. I want to
why
dunk.
not? Bro, yeah, I want to dunk." So, but like, what is the debate there? That like, let me imagine X and then say it's good. Do you want it? Sure, okay. Like, there's nothing profound about debating that.
Yeah, it's like this whole kind of futurology stuff that kind of got big in like the 60s and 70s of like people just coming up with these like ideas about what the future is going to be like, and that's why we need to give technology funding. Like we need to give like these tech companies tons of money. I mean, that's the thing. That's what it sounds like. Is basically just coming up with these like fantastic like ideas about like utopian tech sounding technologies that are basically scams to get people to give like tons of money to tech VCs.
Had 50 years of stagnation. And one answer is we ran out of ideas. The other answer is that something happened culturally where it wasn't allowed. And then the cultural answer can be sort of a bottom-up answer, that it was just some transformation of humanity into this sort of more docile kind of a species, or it can be at least partially top down, that there is this, this machinery of government that got changed into this stagnations thing. I think something like this, nuclear power was supposed to be the power of the 21st century, and it somehow has gotten off-ramped all over the world on a worldwide basis.
So in a sense, we're already living under a moderate rule of the Antichrist in that telling. Do you think God is in control of history?
Man, this is again like I think that there's always room for human freedom and human choice. These things are, or at least where we are today, these things are, they're not, they're not absolutely predetermined one way or another.
Right. But God wouldn't leave us forever under the rule of a mild, moderate, stagnationist Antichrist, right? That can't be how the story ends, right?
It's attributing too much causation to God is always a problem. If I don't know, there are different Bible verses I can give you, but I'll give you John 15:25, where Christ says, "They hated me without cause." And so it's all these people that are persecuting Christ have no reason, no cause for why they're persecuting Christ. And if we interpret this as a ultimate causation verse, they want to say, I'm persecuting because God caused me to do this. God is causing everything. And the Christian view is anti-Calvinist. God is not behind history. God is not causing everything. If you say God's causing everything,
but you're
scapegoating God.
But God is behind.
God.
But God is behind Jesus Christ entering history because God was not going to leave us in a stagnationist, decadent Roman Empire, right? So at some point, God is going to step in.
I am not
right?
I am not that Calvinist, and
that's not Calvinism, though. That's just Christianity. God will not leave us eternally, staring into screens and being lectured by Greta Thunberg, right? He will not abandon us to that fate.
It is.
Bro, I love how he the ultimate.
There is a great
is like this
I don't know, for better and for worse.
Unbelievable.
I think there's a great deal of scope for human action, for human freedom. If I thought these things were deterministic, you might as well, maybe just accept it. The lions are coming. You should just have some yoga and prayerful meditation and wait while the lions eat you up. And I don't think that's what you're supposed to do.
I agree with that. And I think on that note, I'm just trying to be hopeful and suggesting that, in trying to resist the Antichrist, using your human freedom, you should have hope that you'll succeed, right?
We can agree on that.
Good. Peter Thiel, thank you for joining me.
Bro, this is that was like a nightmare theologian
Yeah,
the rotation. That's the shittiest theological
That
discussion.
was the shittiest theological discussion of all time.
Yeah, no, Hegel's Theodicy and Leibniz's Theodicy, and like you just compare that level to that trash, and it's unbelievable.
Like, he kept trying to say, like, I'm not that Calvinist. Like, my understanding of Calvinism is that God doesn't give a shit what we do.
Well, you know, Carlos, you're really pushing that that Salafi beard, so you must have been plus 100 in theology.
I mean, what I'll say is that we should try to get Peter Thiel excommunicated from the Catholic Church
Yeah, I
because he
agree
was
with that.
espousing heresies related to
agree.
transhumanism.
I agree, bro. Yeah. No, that was wow. That was
Yeah, no, it's an insane interview, and this is the exoteric Peter Thiel. This is his public facing, like,
yeah,
for human consumption Peter Thiel. The esoteric Peter Thiel is
a
probably
lot darker. What's it called? You know, compare this to, like, I mean, I'm not a huge, I actually just more or less despise him, but you compare that to like Slavoj Žižek or whatever, and it's like even like the most like lame left-wing theorist is just like infinitely more interesting than that trash.
At least Slavoj is entertaining.
Yeah. And like can be thought-provoking, honestly. So, you know, he's quoting Hegel and Lacan and Kant. And,
yeah, it's like all these right wingers. There's like one theorist that they know. Like with Yarvin, it's like Carlyle and James Burnham. With Peter,
bro, Carlyle, what a boring ass influence.
well, yeah, but for Yarvin, it's because Carlyle is an apologist of slavery. So
Wow. Okay, that's so interesting.
yeah, and you know.
Fuck, dude.
And Peter Thiel, it's, you know, Gerard, I guess, is like this fascinating theorist. But in the end, like it's the idea of this stagnation. It's democracy that is causing the stagnation, and we have to destroy democracy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really what it all comes down to.
The dynamic elite needs to take the reins of history again.
Yeah, the dynamic elite like Thiel.